At the end of the world, there is a hole. And in that hole is a city. And the city is sliding into hell. Welcome to MAGNAGOTHICA Maleghast. I think it's MAGNAGOTHICA. MAGNAGOTHICA? Yep. Mechanically, rules-wise, it's a skirmish war game where you have a lot more detail within your units than just en masse. And amongst them, you're Necromancer. But heading into the stuff that's the flavor for the game. I'll definitely like to talk about the rules later on, but there's just... This video was because there's an itch. There's an itch. The game takes place in ANZENMEZZERON. Whoa, was that the name? The game takes place in the city of ANZENMEZZERON, built by the ones before, and built up, and up, and up, and up, and up, and up, by thousands of dead empires, a necropolis at the end of the world. And the reason people come here, and the things come out of it, is because in its very center, death is broken. In the center of the city lies the end of death. Many people wonder what it is, some obsidian throne, the heart of a god, or just a flower yet to wilt entirely. No one knows, but many, many people come to seek it. But to that benefit, within the city's territory, death is broken. After 6 days, all flesh is returned. You just wake up in one of the billions of crypts across the city. Death is such a nonchalant thing that, and even over minor disputes, people are torn to shreds. Killed, beheaded, limbs torn apart for minor discretions. But not everyone who lives here is dead, surprisingly. There's just a likelihood you're not going to be what's called alive any longer. The longer you come back, or the more you suffer from death and resurrection, the more you begin to decay. Which is not that good, becoming one of the city's many ghouls or just wandering corpses. When I mean decay, I don't just mean physically, though that's also part of it. I mean spiritually and mentally. And if you ever want to leave the city after falling under its curse, you can't. The moment anyone who's already suffered and been reborn within the city leaves it, turns to dust. With a notable exception. To everything, actually. To the dust, to the mental degradation and physical degradation, as I can't say degradation, there is an exception. A way around that. A way around the dust, the degradation. Necromancy. Found in many other places across the world, that vile act. It's quite common here. To the point that, if you're living here, it's likely you know a little bit of the dark arts, made a pact with the devil, an imp, who knows. But within the city itself, necromancers are a dime a dozen, so most people just moonlight as a necromancer. Mainly just tour guide, a shopkeep, a janitor. But you know, you might know just a little bit here and there. Mostly to keep yourself sane and alive and not taken by things in the city. But necromancers are so common, it's comical. This isn't to say necromancy being cheap doesn't mean it's not scary. I mean, yeah, in the hands of just a shopkeep that's using it to keep themselves sane and maybe animating a few things into objects. Where the real power comes in, with the real terror, and those that attempt to get into the center of the city. Those are the Great Houses. Members with varied origins that all exploit their gifts in different ways. We'll touch on them in a little bit, because that's partly what you assign your necromancer to. Though back in the city, its size cannot be understated. I mean, just if you've seen some of the images so far, and some more here, it's massive. Massive. The city of 1 billion dead, the Dead City, the Black City, the Cursed City, any terrible, negative city next to it, you probably have a good name. I mean, the Southern Corpse Cistern. There's more of these. Do you see the size of it? Also a food stand. I love this picture. But that is the outside city. There's then the city within the city. And that city within the city is a spider web, going through the safe passages, tunnels, different routes throughout the entire megastructure that have them different pockets of civilization that is enough to fulfill massive cities in the outside world. And this is where the people live, ply their trade, look over safe routes, pilgrimages, scavengers, meat market stands. I mean, you name it. People live here. And not just on some crazed expedition, there's large populations. Nothing too glamorous, but, you know, ramshackle town to next ramshackle town to next, occupied village. Then you walk over just a little bit off the beaten path and all of reality falls apart and there's hellspawn coming from all directions, even inside you. Because the city itself, the longer you walk on the interior of it, doesn't make sense. I mean, the outside is, and the safe routes that you generally follow between the different checkpoints. Makes sense, works, been scouted, safe routes. The deeper you go and the farther you go off the beaten path, the weirder it gets. An example terrain that's briefly brought up is an entire swamp where all the trees are the mutated bodies of sinners that never made it out of the city. Instead of reaching for sunlight and leaves, they're just reaching for heaven. So cool. Though even touching on the city and what's available and whether it's just medieval or not, who cares? I mean, have you seen the cover? It's metalhead, punk, gothic, in both terms of the gothic, punk, whatever you want. You jump from a PMC to anime Catholics. Okay. And partly due to the fact that the city itself is at the end of the world and no one can die when they stand in here, there's people from ages and ages ago and people even up to modern times. Point that there is a tram system in the city. Only one, and it's not to be trusted, but there's still a tram. It's a setting where you can have the aesthetics of witchcraft, dark arts, occultism, just making pacts with demons, alchemy, and then just modern weapons and firearms. God, I love this chart. You've got, well, first off, just the image of the character in the center, and then organs taken from someone else, other arcane foci, and then just cigarettes. It's just such a extreme level of that, goofy isn't the exact word I'm looking for, it's close, but just ridiculous. Ridiculous is the word. It's just so much metal necromancy thrown together, extremely dark things, and then a punk aesthetic thrown on top of it, in just the ridiculous scale and time. And speaking of aesthetics, and generally what you'll be finding, we have the great houses. First up, C.A.R.C.A.S.S. Of all things, a PMC. Focused on range, formations, grouping up with allies, and reloading, and headshots. Overwhelming firepower. Oh, also before we move on, this is the playlist. Every faction has a playlist. If heavy metal necromancy didn't get its tone across through the aesthetic. And I mean, just look at that! It's got eyes! Next is the GOREGRINDERS. Which, I mean, Chainsaw Man? But all about running up rage and speed, going fast. And of course, my favorite unit, the wave! Oh, that's not good. Yeah, I'm seeing the wave file right over there, that's not good. But fast, speed, knock them down, they get back up again. Only once. Just being mad. Just hitting things really hard. You run in, melee. Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne. And of course, the GOREGRINDERS playlist. You're keeping that in. Next up is GORGAMOX. GORGAMOX is weird. So, there is no deal with this devil, nor is it really considered still a great house in the sense of its power and influence, but it has no structure. The ability in spellcasting is just given randomly to the lowest of society, spreading plagues, disease, things that can remove flesh from bone. Damage over time. Ugh. Though I do just also want to note one of their specific units is just... it's just a horde of rats puppeting a corpse. It's got a great picture. Also, Basic Ooze has been buffed up. It's the boss version for this army. Before we move on, the GORGAMOX playlist. GORGAMOX? Am I really gonna screw all these up? GORGAMOX. Next is the DEADSOULS, who worship the god who died. And in part of that process, and the ability to keep their powers and themselves intact is actually intact's very questionable. So they got rid of their soul. Because everyone else is here worrying about what arcs or what pacts to make because, you know, slowly degrading every time you die here, your soul's already damned because the city's falling into hell. Just get rid of it. Who needs it? Bound entirely to their physical form. Also questionable, They are the Omen. They have benefits to getting units in isolation. And no, I don't mean moving them and separating them. I mean, if a unit on the enemy side is alone, they do additional things to them. Sometimes it's just more damage, sometimes it's dooming them. Alright, doom. So a lot of their abilities and spells can apply doom to an enemy or a unit. And by round 4, they just take 6 damage. Which in this system is almost a full bar of health for most things. Or is. Not to mention it can also stack other bonuses and damage with some of the other effects and abilities, but it's just... whew. And the DEADSOULS playlist. The ABHORRERS! Yes! Yes, yes, yes! 𝕿𝖊 I mean, look at that image! Look at it! So an orthodox heretical order from outside the city made its way here. The idea, practice necromancy to fight necromancy. And then also do katana about it, I guess. There's a shuriken ability, by the way. But also, like, some cool things of, like, just look at their units, and specifically this one. The mix of biblically accurate angel and corpse. And to also summarize it, I mean, this is the portrait for the general necromancer from this house. That's Alexander Anderson. The brief mechanics-wise, there's the tag of Miracle, which, if a unit dies, they get to roll a dice and they might just come back. Difficult roll, but just have them come back. Not to mention Stance as well, which means on just certain rounds they have different abilities, or the abilities do different things. And the ABHORRERS playlist. Then the IGORRI, made up of a bunch of either mutants, scientists, doctors, okay, not even going through all the flavor text. Basically, have on the outside world from the city a bunch of different Frankensteins, not the monster, the doctor, get together, came to the city, founded this house. You know, all the unethical stuff. And it's not just in the mixing things together and make it Frankenstein, they do have that, but they also have as their units lichen and Strigoi. It's messing with all the physical things when it relates to necromancy, including just vampirism and lycanthropy. Debatably. One of their main mechanics-wise is Mutate, which they can stack up mutation tokens, which they can either expend to have do something on one of their units, or if they already have a buff or a debuff, if they would lose a buff token, they can instead spend a mutation token to keep that buff for longer. So it's just stacking buffs and debuffs all throughout your character. And the playlist for IGORRI. That's it when it comes to the great houses. But here's the itch part. The itch part, and the whole reason for this video, and the reason it's an intro to and not just talking about the game itself, and just mechanics. It screams for more. It really does. Like, ridiculous, grand scale, stuff thrown in, goofy on some of the various pictures and images. But when it gets to the units themselves, there's no flavor text. It doesn't need it to run what it is. I mean, it's a, like $6.60 skirmish war game on itch. Like, you can pick it up easy. And the art itself is already well worth that, but it's just, I mean, come on, you look at some of these units and, like, more about the faction. I want to run a tabletop RPG in this. And it doesn't even necessarily be like its own super fleshed out setting, the world outside of it, that is. The city itself's enough of that. And it could kind of be placed in a lot of different places. I mean, in AOS, you could have it just as a city in Shaish. Or is it Shaish? 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 With Warhammer Fantasy, Nehekar somewhere. Enter another fantasy setting, fill in the blank here, then place an ANZENMEZZERON within it. Because it's just the one city, you really could place it in different locations. And just... because the golden masks, okay? The golden masks. Let alone everything else, and expanding upon the devils and some of the character figures and the... When it came to the ABHORRERS, every unit outside of the Holy Body has a golden mask. Tells a slight story, doesn't it? They don't want to show the faces of those they're using. But that's just me insinuating. I can insinuate all day about a lot of these. But I can't. Or not, I mean I can, but it's not written there. It's just asking for it. You could put entire paragraphs with each of these. You could have it that all the Abhorrers units that are being brought with them and that they're bringing into battle are all the people that came on this crusade with them. Dead and reanimated over and over and over again, covering their face and body so you don't see the horrific things that have happened to it. But again, that's just insinuation. But the stuff that's here, it's just screaming for it. But it's not the game itself. Definitely going to want to talk about the mechanics later, and more in depth on the units and factions. But that's an intro to the world of MAGNAGOTHICA MALEGHAST. Punk, metal, necromancy. Have a nice day.
Swagger down the street with your red lips and funky beat. You better hold your head up to the sky. I'm gonna roll with you till the day I die.